The red dust swirled outside the cave entrance as Lyra pressed her hand against her injured leg. The mining colony's harsh winds howled through the empty tunnels, carrying the bitter smell of metal and rust. 3 hours had passed since her people left her behind, their swift departure marked only by the rising dust clouds of their ships. She tried to stand again, but her leg wouldn't cooperate. The cave-in had done its damage well, crushing the delicate bone structure that made her species such excellent climbers. Blood, tinted slightly purple, seeped through her protective suit, where sharp rocks had torn through the material. "Status report." She spoke into her communicator, her voice trembling. The device responded with only static. They had cut her off completely, just as protocol demanded. Her people, the stellar nomads, lived by strict rules. An injured member meant reduced efficiency. Reduced efficiency meant potential failure, and failure was not acceptable. Lyra looked around the dimly lit cave. The mining equipment stood silent, its lights blinking lazily in the darkness. The colony had been profitable until they hit an unstable section of rock. She had been leading the drilling team when the tunnel collapsed. As shift supervisor, she had pushed them to go deeper, hoping to exceed their quotas. Now she was paying the price for her ambition. The emergency supplies she had managed to grab would last 3 days at most. The planet's atmosphere was barely breathable, filled with particles that would slowly poison her lungs. Without proper filtration, she would begin to feel the effects within hours. The thought made her chest tighten, but she forced herself to breathe slowly. Panic would only make things worse. She dragged herself to the control panel near the cave entrance. Its screen flickered weakly, showing the colony's remaining power levels. Most systems had been shut down during the evacuation, but some emergency protocols were still running. She tried accessing the communication array, her fingers dancing across the dusty screen. Access denied. Of course, they had locked her out of everything except basic life support. The pain in her leg grew worse as the hours passed. She had used what little medical supplies she had, but it wasn't enough. The bone needed proper setting and treatment. Without it, even if she somehow survived, she might never walk properly again. Night fell outside, bringing with it a bone-chilling cold that seeped through the cave walls. Lyra huddled closer to the backup generator, grateful for its faint warmth. The stars visible through the cave entrance seemed to mock her. Somewhere up there, her people were already jumping to the next system, their ships cutting through space with elegant efficiency. They would log her as lost during operations, a polite way of saying she had become a liability they couldn't afford. She thought about her family unit, wondering if they would mourn her or simply accept her loss as necessary. Her younger sister would probably take her position now. She had always been more careful, more by the book. Maybe that's why she was still alive and advancing in rank, while Lyra lay here, abandoned and dying. The night grew longer, and Lyra found herself doing something she had never done before. She began to question her people's ways. They had achieved so much by following their strict codes. Their civilization had spread across dozens of systems, their technology advancing faster than many older species. But sitting here in the darkness, feeling her life slowly slip away, she couldn't help but wonder if there was another way. A sudden beeping from the control panel caught her attention. Something was moving in the upper atmosphere. Probably just space debris, she thought. No one would come to this abandoned colony. Her people had marked it as depleted and dangerous. Yet she couldn't help but feel a spark of hope as she watched the small dot on the screen move closer. "Please," she whispered to the empty cave, her voice echoing off the cold walls. "Please let someone find me." The red dust continued to swirl outside, carrying her words away into the darkness of an alien night. James Reynolds rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the blinking light on his ship's control panel. He had been doing salvage runs in this sector for 3 years, but something about this signal was different. Most abandoned mining colonies gave off random energy spikes from decaying equipment. This one pulsed with a steady rhythm. "Computer, analyze that signature again," he said, reaching for his cold coffee. His small ship, the Wanderer, hummed softly around him as it processed the request. Energy signature indicates active power source. The computer responded in its flat voice. Matches patterns consistent with colonial backup generators. Location: mining facility M247. Warning: colony marked as hazardous due to structural instability. James leaned forward, studying the planet's surface through his view screen. The red dust storms made it hard to see anything clearly, but his instruments showed the colony's main entrance was still intact. Something about this place made his salvager's instincts tingle. Abandoned colonies usually meant good salvage, but they also meant danger. He ran his hand through his messy brown hair, considering his options. The smart move would be to mark the location and come back with a proper salvage crew. But proper crews meant sharing the profits, and James hadn't stayed independent this long by sharing. Computer, scan for life signs, he ordered, already reaching for his environment suit. He'd learned long ago to trust his gut feelings. Warning: atmospheric conditions interfering with detailed scans, the computer replied, detecting faint biological signatures approximately 200 meters below surface level. Species: unknown. Medical status: critical. James froze in the middle of checking his suit's oxygen levels. Life signs: in an abandoned colony. That changed everything. Salvage could wait. Plot me a safe landing zone near the main entrance, he said, strapping himself into the pilot's seat, and prep the medical kit. The good one. The Wanderer descended through the swirling dust clouds, its landing lights cutting through the darkness. James guided it down with practiced ease, though the wind made the ship shudder more than he liked. As soon as they touched down, he began the landing checklist, working faster than usual. Computer, keep the engines hot, he said, sealing his helmet. If those dust storms get worse, we might need to leave in a hurry. He grabbed his emergency pack and medical kit, then headed for the airlock. His suit's lights activated automatically as he stepped onto the planet's surface. The red dust immediately coated his visor, forcing him to adjust his filters. The colony's entrance loomed before him, a dark mouth in the cliff face. Mining equipment lay scattered around, half buried in red dust. James checked his scanner, following the power signature. The backup generator was still running, which meant the life support systems might be working too. Inside, his boots echoed on metal floors. Emergency lights cast weak blue shadows on the walls. The air felt wrong, heavy with the weight of abandonment, and something else he couldn't quite name. "Hello," he called out, his voice carrying through his suit's external speakers. "Anyone here? I picked up your signal." Only silence answered him. His scanner beeped, showing the life signs were getting stronger. He moved deeper into the colony, checking his oxygen levels out of habit. The tunnels branched out in several directions, but his scanner pointed him toward the lower levels. "This is James Reynolds," he tried again. "I'm here to help. If you can hear me, make any kind of noise." He reached a junction where the tunnel had partially collapsed. His suit's sensors warned him about unstable ground ahead, but the life signs were definitely coming from that direction. James took a deep breath, remembering his father's words. Sometimes being brave means being smart enough to be careful. Carefully, he began picking his way through the debris. The scanner's beeping grew more insistent. Whatever, or whoever, was down here, they were close. And according to his medical scanner, they were running out of time. "Hold on," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "Just hold on. I'm coming." James rounded the final corner, and his light fell on a scene that made him stop in his tracks. Against the far wall, partially hidden behind some fallen equipment, lay a figure in a torn environmental suit. The suit's design was like nothing he'd ever seen before, with strange angles and patterns that seemed to shift in his light. The figure moved slightly, and James saw a flash of silvery skin through the tears in the suit. His medical scanner beeped urgently, confirming what he could see. Whoever this was, they were in bad shape. "Hey there," he said softly. approaching with his hands raised. "I'm here to help. Can you understand me?" The alien's head turned toward him, and James saw large, iridescent eyes widen in what might have been fear. She tried to push herself away from him, but her injured leg prevented any real movement. A small sound of pain escaped her. "Easy, easy," James said, reaching for his translator device. He switched it on, hoping it could handle whatever language she spoke. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to help." The translator crackled for a moment before producing a series of musical tones. The alien froze, then responded with similar sounds that the translator converted to English. "Human," she said, her translated voice tinged with disbelief and fear. "Why are you here?" "This colony is marked as abandoned. I picked up your power signature," James explained, kneeling down at a safe distance. "Then I found life signs. I couldn't just leave someone here to die." He gestured to his medical kit. "Will you let me help you?" The alien, Lara, she told him through the translator, stared at him for a long moment. "My people say humans are dangerous primitives," she said finally. "That you let emotions cloud your judgment." James couldn't help but smile inside his helmet. "Well, right now this primitive's emotions are telling him to help someone in need. And my judgment says your leg needs treatment before we can move you safely." He opened his medical kit, displaying the contents. "I've treated a few different species before. If you tell me about your biology, I can adapt the treatment." Lyra watched him carefully as he worked, explaining her physiology between moments of pain. Her silvery skin required special care with bandages, and her bone structure was different from human anatomy. But James worked slowly and carefully, using his scanner to guide his treatment. "Why did they leave you?" he asked quietly as he finished setting her leg with a portable bone stabilizer. "I failed," she replied, her translated voice carrying a mix of bitterness and shame. "The cave-in was my responsibility. Injured members reduce efficiency. It is our way." James shook his head as he packed up his supplies. "That's not a way I could ever understand. Where I come from, we don't leave people behind. Not if we can help it." "Even aliens?" Lyra asked, watching him curiously. "Especially not aliens," James said firmly. "The universe is too big and too empty to turn away from anyone who needs help." He checked his scanner again. "Now we need to get you out of here. The colony's structure is becoming more unstable by the hour." Lyra looked at her newly bandaged leg. "I cannot walk." "Then I'll carry you," James said simply, already planning the safest route back. "My ship has better medical equipment, and we can figure out our next move once you're stable." "You would do this? For a stranger? For an alien?" The disbelief in her translated voice was clear. James carefully positioned himself to lift her. "My father used to say that kindness isn't wasted just because someone doesn't expect it. Ready?" As he lifted her, Lyra made a sound that his translator didn't catch, but somehow James thought it might have been something like a laugh, or maybe a sob. "Your father sounds as strange as you are," she said. "Thank you," James replied with a smile in his voice. "Now let's get out of here before this place comes down around us." Together, they began their careful journey back through the darkened tunnels, a human and an alien, defying both physics and prejudice with each step forward. The first tremor caught them halfway through the main tunnel. Dust and small rocks showered down as James held Lyra closer, pressing them both against the wall for protection. His suit's sensors screamed warnings about structural integrity failing throughout the complex. "That didn't feel good," James muttered, checking his map display. They still had at least 15 minutes of careful walking before reaching the surface, and that was if nothing else went wrong. "The mining weakened the entire structure," Lyra explained, her translator making her voice sound tense. "My team, we dug too deep too quickly." Another tremor shook the tunnel, this one stronger than the last. James switched to his suit's enhanced vision mode as several emergency lights flickered and died. "We need to move faster," he said, already starting forward again. "But the main tunnel ahead is blocked." We'll have to find another way. Lyra pointed to a side passage. The maintenance tunnels. They're narrower, but they run parallel to the main shaft. They turned into the smaller tunnel, forcing James to crouch as he carried Lyra. His suit scraped against the walls, sending echoes through the darkness. The air was getting worse. His sensors showed increasing levels of toxic gas seeping through new cracks in the rock. My suit's filtering system is failing, Lyra said suddenly, her breathing becoming labored. The damage from earlier. James didn't hesitate. He stopped and carefully set her down, then reached for his helmet seals. We can share my filter. My suit's made for worse conditions than this. No. Lyra tried to stop him. You don't understand. My atmospheric needs are different from yours. I could poison you. Another violent shake sent more debris raining down. James checked his map again. They were running out of time and options. Then we do this the hard way, he said, lifting her again. Hold on tight. We're going to run. He started moving faster, ignoring the protest from his muscles. His suit's joints whirred with the effort, helping him maintain speed despite the awkward position and extra weight. Behind them, they could hear sections of the tunnel beginning to collapse. Left turn ahead, Lyra called out, her voice growing weaker. Then up. There's an emergency shaft. They found the shaft. A narrow tube with a maintenance ladder running up its length. James looked up into the darkness, then at Lyra. This is going to be tricky. Can you hold onto my back? I think so, she said. James helped her position herself, her arms around his neck, her injured legs secured as best they could manage. He could feel her breathing becoming more irregular. Just hold on, he said, grabbing the first rung. And stay with me. Tell me about your home world. What's it like? As he climbed, Lyra's voice in his ears described floating cities and crystal forests. He kept her talking, even as his arms burned, and his suit warned him about the failing structure around them. Twice they had to stop as debris fell past them, but James never lost his grip. Almost there, he panted, seeing light above them. The surface entrance was just ahead, but Lyra had gone quiet. His suit's sensors showed her life signs weakening. The toxic gas was affecting her worse than he'd feared. With a final surge of effort, James pulled them both through the surface hatch. The red dust storm was still raging, but through it he could see the welcoming shape of the Wanderer. He started running again, every step a battle against the wind and his own exhaustion. They reached his ship just as the ground began to shake one final time. James practically dove through the airlock, cycling it closed behind them as fast as he could. Clean air flooded the chamber as he gently laid Lyra down. Computer, medical emergency, he shouted, removing his helmet. Get us into orbit now. As the ship's engines roared to life, James looked down at his unconscious passenger. Her silvery skin had taken on a dangerous tint, but she was still breathing. They had made it out, but their challenges were far from over. Hang in there, he whispered, preparing the ship's medical bay. The hard part's done. Now we just have to keep you alive. The soft hum of medical equipment filled the Wanderer's small medical bay as Lyra slowly regained consciousness. Her large eyes focused on James, who sat nearby monitoring her vital signs. The ship's air filtration had been adjusted to match her needs, and her breathing had finally stabilized. How long was I unconscious? She asked, her translator device now working more clearly in the clean environment. About 6 hours, James replied, checking her leg brace. You had a bad reaction to those gases, but the ship's medical system managed to clear them from your system. How do you feel? Strange, Lyra admitted, looking around the medical bay. I've never been treated by anyone before. On my world, we use automated systems. Personal care is considered inefficient. James pulled up a chair, his curiosity obvious on his face. That sounds lonely. Don't you ever just want to talk to someone when you're sick? Talk. Lyra seemed puzzled. About what? Illness is a malfunction to be corrected. nothing more. She paused, studying him. Yet you've spent hours watching over me. Why? Because that's what humans do, James said simply. We look after each other. And right now, you're under my care. The conversation paused as James changed her bandages. Lyra watched his careful movements with fascination. Your hands, she said suddenly. They're so warm. Our medical robots are always cold. James smiled. Well, being warm-blooded has its advantages. Though I bet your people have plenty of advantages I've never even thought of. Over the next few hours, as James tended to her injuries, they exchanged stories about their worlds. Lyra described the massive colony ships her people lived on, always moving from system to system in search of resources. James told her about Earth's oceans, about rainforests and deserts, about cities where millions of different beings live together. But how do you maintain efficiency with so much chaos? Lyra asked, genuinely confused. Different species, different needs, different goals. It sounds impossible to manage. We don't try to manage it, James explained, preparing a nutrient solution adapted for her species. We let it flow naturally. Sure, it's messy sometimes, but that's where the best ideas come from, when different ways of thinking come together. Lyra was quiet for a moment, processing this. On my colony ship, everything had a purpose. Every action was calculated for maximum benefit to the whole. Those who couldn't contribute, she trailed off, remembering her own abandonment. Were left behind, James finished softly. Like you were. Yes. Lyra touched her injured leg. I always accepted this as logical, necessary. But now, she looked at James with those strange, beautiful eyes. Now I wonder if we lost something important by being so efficient. James checked the ship's navigation system before responding. They were safely in orbit, hidden behind one of the planet's moons. You know what I think? I think there's room in the universe for both efficiency and compassion. They don't have to fight each other. Perhaps, Lyra said thoughtfully. But my people would never understand this. They would say I've been contaminated by primitive ideas. James couldn't help but laugh. Primitive, huh? Well, this primitive just saved your life with a bunch of primitive medical equipment and primitive human care. For the first time, Lyra made a sound that the translator identified as laughter. Yes, you did. And I'm beginning to think that perhaps being primitive isn't such a bad thing after all. They spent the rest of the day talking about everything and nothing. About stars and planets, about dreams and fears, about the infinite ways life had evolved across the galaxy. With each story, each shared moment, the gap between their worlds grew a little smaller. As the ship's day cycle drew to a close, Lyra looked at James with new understanding in her eyes. I think I'm starting to see why humans have spread so far across space. Despite your technological limitations, you have something we never considered important. Oh, James raised an eyebrow. What's that? Heart, Lyra said simply. You have heart. The alarm blared through the Wanderer's cabin, startling both James and Lyra. Red warning lights flashed across the control panels as James rushed to check the sensors. What is it? Lyra asked, hobbling to the co-pilot's seat with her healing leg. James's face grew serious as he studied the readings. 3 ships just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Big ones. He looked at Lyra. Friends of yours? Lyra's silvery skin paled even further. Enforcement vessels. They must have detected my life signs. Her hands trembled as she gripped the seat. They've come to finish what they started. Not if I have anything to say about it, James said, his fingers flying across the controls. The Wanderer's engines hummed to life as he began evasive maneuvers. The larger ships moved with deadly grace, their sleek forms cutting through space like predatory fish. A transmission crackled through their communication system, the translator converting it to English. Salvage vessel, this is Stellar Nomad Enforcement. You have recovered forbidden cargo. Surrender the defective unit immediately. Defective unit, James muttered angrily. Is that what they call you? Lyra's voice was small. In their eyes, that's all I am now, a broken part to be disposed of. James hit the ship's thrusters, diving the Wanderer toward the planet's largest moon. Well, they'll have to catch us first. And there's one thing your people don't understand about human ships. What's that? Lyra asked as energy beams from the pursuit vessels lit up space around them. James grinned. We build them like we live, adaptable to anything. He threw the ship into a tight spiral, using the moon's gravity to slingshot them faster. Computer, activate the salvage modifications. The Wanderer shuddered as hidden panels across its hull opened up, revealing a mess of jury-rigged equipment. James had spent years modifying his ship with salvage tech from a dozen different species. Releasing magnetic chaff, he announced, hitting a button. A cloud of metallic particles sprayed out behind them, confusing the pursuer's sensors. The enforcement vessel's precise formation broke apart as they tried to maintain tracking. They're charging weapons, Lyra warned, reading the sensor displays. Perfect, James said, flipping more switches. Let's show them what primitive technology can do. He activated the ship's most unique modification, a cobbled-together field generator that could briefly mimic the energy signature of a much larger vessel. The pursuing ship's automatic targeting systems suddenly registered the Wanderer as a massive threat, forcing them to recalculate their attack patterns. In that moment of confusion, James dove the ship into a dense asteroid field. Your people's ships are too big and too precise to follow us in here, he explained, weaving between the floating rocks with practiced skill. They rely too much on their computers. But how can you navigate this? Lyra asked, watching in amazement as he threaded the ship through gaps that seemed impossibly small. Human instinct, James replied, his hand steady on the controls. Sometimes you have to feel your way through instead of calculating everything. The enforcement vessels tried to follow, but their massive ships couldn't match the Wanderer's agility. Their energy beams shattered asteroids, but couldn't catch the smaller ship as it danced through the chaos. James kept them moving, using the asteroids for cover while activating more of his ship's unusual modifications. He released clouds of sensor-jamming particles, projected false energy signatures, and used the asteroid field's natural magnetic properties to hide their trail. After 20 tense minutes, the sensors showed the enforcement vessels breaking off pursuit. They couldn't risk their valuable ships chasing what appeared to be a malfunctioning salvage vessel through an asteroid field. They're leaving, Lyra said in disbelief, watching the larger ships disappear into faster-than-light travel. You actually outmaneuvered them. James finally allowed himself to relax slightly. Like I said, being primitive has its advantages. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most advanced one. My people would never have thought to use technology this way, Lyra admitted, studying the various modified systems. All this chaos, these imperfect combinations, yet they worked perfectly. That's humanity for you, James said with a tired smile. We're really good at making imperfect things work. He plotted a new course away from the asteroid field. Now let's get you somewhere safe before they come back with reinforcements. The human medical station floated like a giant white wheel against the backdrop of stars. James guided the Wanderer toward one of the docking ports, while Lyra watched with a mixture of anxiety and wonder. Are you sure they'll accept me? She asked, her translator conveying her nervousness. Your people have no obligation to help me. On this station, they help everyone, James explained, carefully aligning the ship. It's one of the things that makes humanity different. We built these places specifically to help anyone who needs it. The docking procedure went smoothly, and soon they were greeted by the station's medical team. To Lyra's surprise, the team included not just humans but several other alien species, all working together efficiently. Dr. Miller, the head physician, examined Lyra's leg with genuine interest. Fascinating bone structure, she said, studying the scans. James did a good job with the emergency treatment, but we can do better. We've treated similar species before. You have? Lyra asked, surprised. The doctor nodded. We get all sorts here. Some running from something, others just lost and in need of help. She smiled warmly. You're not the first to discover that the universe is bigger than their people's beliefs. Over the next few weeks, Lyra underwent several treatments. Her leg healed properly, and she found herself fascinated by the way the medical staff worked. Unlike the cold efficiency of her people's automated systems, there was warmth here, genuine care and interest in each patient's well-being. James visited regularly, bringing her stories from his salvage runs and teaching her about human culture. She learned about concepts like friendship, about the strength that comes from helping others without expecting anything in return. One morning, as she was practicing walking with her fully healed leg, James arrived with important news. I've been in contact with some people, he said. There's a growing community of beings who've left their original cultures, looking for something different. They're offering you sanctuary. Lyra stood by the station's observation window, watching the stars. And my people. The station's got diplomatic protection, James explained. Your people can't touch you here without starting an interstellar incident. You're safe. She turned to him, her iridescent eyes reflecting the starlight. I've been thinking about what I want to do next. The doctors here. They've shown interest in learning about my species' biology. They think it could help them treat others better. James smiled, already seeing where this was going. You want to stay and help? Yes, Lyra said firmly. I want to be more than just efficient. I want to help make the universe a little less cold, a little more like what you showed me it could be. The station's lights dimmed slightly as the day cycle shifted to evening. In the softer light, Lyra could see the countless ships coming and going from the station, each one carrying beings who needed help or were offering it. You know, James said, leaning against the window, I could use someone with your knowledge on my salvage runs. Someone who understands advanced tech and isn't afraid to use it in primitive ways. Lyra made that sound again, the one that was becoming more recognizable as laughter. Are you offering me a job, human? More like a partnership, James replied. We could help more people that way, and maybe show the galaxy that efficiency and compassion aren't opposites after all. Lyra looked out at the stars again, but this time she saw them differently. Not as cold points of light to be cataloged and used, but as bridges between all living things, each one a potential connection waiting to be made. I accept, she said simply. Though you should know, I've learned enough about humans to know you're not primitive at all. Just perfectly imperfect. James chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. Together, they watched the endless stream of ships arriving at the station, each one carrying its own story of hope, survival, and transformation. Somewhere out there, Lyra knew her people continued their endless pursuit of efficiency. But here, in this moment, she had found something far more valuable. A new beginning, shaped by the most unexpected of teachers. A human who had simply refused to leave someone behind.